Let's face it, between Echo, Madam Web, and a bunch of other stuff I didn't have a chance to talk about, 2024 hasn't gotten off to a great start. It's not like the big studios have given us much of a reason to be optimistic lately either, since it seems like most of them would rather double down on all the things that have been driving fans away for the last few years instead of just making a better product. And if anything, we've been trained to believe that things are only gonna get worse before they get better, if they ever do. So even though I loved Dune Part 1, I couldn't help but feel a little bit skeptical when the hype machine for Part 2 revved up and we started hearing lines like masterpiece, the new Lord of the Rings, greatest sci-fi movie ever, blah blah blah. I mean, I was hopeful. They hadn't given me any reason to doubt them, but you can never really be sure with stuff like this. I shouldn't have been skeptical. Denis Villeneuve, this guy and his team delivered big time. And while there might be one or two things in this film that kind of made me wonder what the thought process was behind it, it's not hyperbole to say that Dune Part 2 is the biggest cinematic mic drop any of us are going to see this year. Just speaking as a film fan, this is the type of epic, experiential event that just doesn't come around very often. This is something you have to see on the biggest screen possible. I swear, I'm not trying to overhype it. I don't think I can overhype it. This is easily one of the best science fiction films of the last decade. It might be the best, honestly. And if it doesn't win Best Picture at the Oscars, then the Academy can eat a bag of dicks as far as I'm concerned, because ain't nothing even coming close to this film in 2024. First of all, right off the bat, this is one of the most visually stunning movies I've seen in years. The amount of eye candy on the screen almost makes you want to weep. The DP who shot the film did an interview where he says that when he saw it for the first time, even he was blown away by how good it looked. And I believe it. The jaw-droppingly gorgeous cinematography in this film is just ridiculous. All the masterful things that Villeneuve does with lighting and color and depth of field and subtle use of CG. I know it's a weird thing to say, but I never realized that sand could look so beautiful.
I don't like sand.
You shut your whore mouth!
Yeah, that's right. Anakin had no idea what he was missing out on. The one critique I could make about the visuals is that some sequences are shot in black and white. And I couldn't tell you why. It's the Harkonnen scenes on Giadi Prime, but not all of them. Some of them are in color, and we also saw Giadi Prime in Part 1, and that was all in color too, so why do it this way? The Harkonnens are all pale as a sheet anyway, so what was really gained by this? It just seemed very random to me. Minor gripe, yeah, I just thought it was weird. But aside from the visuals, there is so much going on in this movie. I know there were some people who complained that Part 1 was all set up or whatever. Part 2 is the payoff for all that stuff. It picks up right where Part 1 left us, and it doesn't waste any time in diving deeper into the characters and the mythology and the world building. And even if, like me, you don't know a whole lot about Dune, you know there's a hell of a lot to explore. I don't want to spoil it, but there are so many fascinating things about the politics and the false prophecy and the ideologies and the cultures of all the different factions on the board here. Plus, there's also a war going on, so there's more action this time too. As packed full of information as Part 1 was, Part 2 is even more dense on top of being more action-oriented. And the best part is that they never dumb it down. They never treat the audience like idiots. They went in thinking, we're treating this like the smart story it is, and we're gonna trust that the audience is smart enough to keep up with it. Glorious. Do you have any idea how f***ing rare that is these days? Well, if you've been watching this channel for a while, then yeah, you probably do. So make no mistake, this is absolutely a thinking fans movie, and I f***ing love it for that. But that's also kind of where I have another minor gripe. Like with Part 1, they explain things well enough that you can follow what's going on as long as you pay attention, but you've got to pay close attention because there's so much they're hitting you with that if you don't keep your brain turned on at all times and make the effort to keep up with the movie, it's gonna lose you. Like, I haven't read the book, only seen parts of the David Lynch movie, but I enjoyed the sci-fi miniseries in the early 2000s, so I was familiar with what was going on, but I still felt like, wow, I'd better not blink. If I do, I'm gonna miss something. And even then, I could have used a little more explanation about the water of life and the prophecy and stuff like that. Not surprising, right? I mean, people call the book unfilmable for a reason. And even though I thought they did about as well as anyone possibly could in condensing it all, especially in Part 1, there are moments here and there where stuff leaks through the cracks a little bit. Like the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib is a much bigger part of the story this time, but that's always kept pretty vague. The audience is never never really told exactly what's in it, not completely, and whenever we learn a new aspect of it, that tends to not happen until it becomes relevant to the plot, and then they'll just spring it on us from out of nowhere. It's not done badly, and I get it, even with 3 hours you've only got so much time, but I mean, we don't find out that there's a line in the prophecy about desert spring tears until the exact moment they need to do something with desert spring tears, so there were moments where I wish they'd given us the full text of this prophecy early on just so we had it as a reference. But don't take any of this as serious criticisms, okay? Adapting Dune is a fucking Herculean task, so the fact that we never once leave minor gripe territory is pretty damn good. And just to finish off the gripes here, I'll say that the pacing is not quite as strong as Part 1. Part 1 absolutely flew by. Part 2 does feel longer. And I'm not saying it drags. It doesn't. Madam Web, that f***ing dragged. Here, it's just long because there's a lot they need to cover. There's more story in this one. I'd say Act 2 gets a bit long in the tooth sometimes because that's where they had to condense the most stuff about the prophecy and the Bene Gesserit and whatnot, but that stuff is all super interesting. So if you're complaining about there being too much of it, Dune just might not be your thing. And that's as negative as this review is gonna get. Now let's get back to singing the praises. The cast of this movie is fantastic. I could go on and on about everybody, but Timothée Chalamet really nailed it. He's got all the range that a role like this needs, a whole new intensity. You totally buy into Paul's journey from lost kid to revolutionary leader to borderline messianic figure. He's even kind of scary at times, which makes perfect sense considering where the story's going. Rebecca Ferguson, Stellan Skarsgård, Javier Bardem, all of them great. And Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, holy shit, what a scene stealer this dude is. Just like with Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen, this guy just radiates that sadistic, psychotic, make your skin crawl energy. He really embraced this role, and damn is Feyd-Rautha creepy as hell. He's one of those villains that is so vile and so evil, he's almost uncomfortable to watch. And that final fight with him and Paul, awesome. Really tense, white knuckle, balls in your throat type of stuff. Unfortunately, Christopher Walken and Florence Pugh, as good as they are, aren't on screen very much. Same thing with Paul's sister, played by who looks like she's gonna be a fascinating character in Part 3. But as I understand it, the Emperor and Princess Irulan are mostly in the background in the book anyway, so you can't really complain about that. And something else that impressed me was how emotionally engaging it is. The relationships are so heartfelt. Paul and his mom, Paul and Chani, Paul and Stilgar. It all just felt so raw and powerful and messy and ugly sometimes too. But that's good because it's f***ing real. It sucked me in instantly, which I didn't expect knowing what I know about what's gonna happen later. By the end of the film, I was surprised how much I'd grown to care about these people. So when they start throwing the emotional gut punches, those things hit hard. So much so that watching Dune Part 2 is kind of an emotionally draining experience, in the best way possible. Not like it tries to make you miserable or anything, it just knows the right buttons to push and the right heartstrings to tug on to make you feel things that you didn't expect to feel. Don't be surprised if you tear up once or twice watching this. It's one of those movies. And as cathartic as the ending is, it sets the stage for even bigger gut punches to come. For instance, as I understand it, they took some liberties with Chani and how she reacts to a particular thing that happens at the end of the book. In the movie, she goes a different way, which could make adapting Dune Messiah more complicated, but could also make it even more emotionally devastating. Because with the way Part 2 ends and where it's going later in Dune Messiah, if they can connect those dots the right way, oh my God, I'm salivating at how dramatically juicy that could be. And after Part 2, I have no reason to think they won't pull that off. Dune Part 2 lived up to all the hype as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely epic, beautiful, thought-provoking. I think I do slightly prefer Part 1 just because the pacing was a little tighter and all the information they throw at you was a bit easier to digest, but wow, it's really hard to imagine how they could have done this any better. The incredible filmmaking craftsmanship on display here is really something to behold. It looks f***ing gorgeous. The score by Hans Zimmer is beautiful. The cast all bring their A game. It's really smart science fiction that's gonna make you feel and think about so many different things, and it builds on everything they set up in Part 1 to a payoff that's so much better than I dared to hope it would be. This has gotta be one of the best films in years, and I say this knowing that it probably won't be for everybody. People with short attention spans, or who get bored easily, or who just want want to be spoon-fed some escapism so they can turn their brain off and jerk it to a bunch of explosions and shiny things, this may not be for them. And hey, that's fine if that's the kind of stuff that does it for you, but god damn, you're really missing out. Because if you can't appreciate a film like this when we get it, a film this f***ing good, then I don't know what to tell you. Considering what Hollywood's usual output has been like lately, Dune Part 2 is like a diamond in a sea of garbage. I think everybody should see this movie. After suffering through crap like Madam Web and Wish and the Marvels, nothing would make me happier than to see Dune Part 2 absolutely f***ing obliterate the box office, because no movie out there right now deserves it more than this does. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And most importantly, don't forget to do all the other YouTube things by hitting that like button, sharing the video, subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and making sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be gutted like a fish by a bald black and white Austin Butler is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now. I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned, go see Dune Part 2 for God's sake. I'll see you next time.